Welcome to Kian's Kiosk, insightful ruminations on the continuum of care.
Hello, everyone. It's great to be with you today. I have a very special guest who's been a colleague and a friend over the years now. Literally, single-handedly, I saw him build the whole industry, and he's doing more of the same in different areas. I'm thrilled to be introducing Don Jones, and I'll have him tell us about his background, but I picked up his professional career when he was running Qualcomm Life. So, Don, welcome.
Yeah, Kian, thank you very much. Glad to be here with you today. I've got an eclectic healthcare background. Started off in emergency medical services, was very deeply involved in implementing the first paramedic program in the city of San Diego. Went on to grow a small San Diego ambulance company into what's now Global Medical Response, probably better known as American Medical Response, which is the world's largest emergency medical services provider with 38,000 paramedics and nurses, 550 medical aircraft and helicopters, and about 8,000 ambulances. Also was deeply involved in building MCare, now known as Envision, which is the largest medical group in the country. Predominantly hospital-based contracted physicians and predominantly emergency physicians. And then also MA, which grew into become the largest private practice in Mexico. So a lot of physician-oriented kind of background. And then, as you well know, in 2002, I joined Qualcomm, something that was brand new to me, to join a silicon telecommunications company and to help build their whole effort in getting the healthcare industry to understand and begin adopting principles of connectivity, mobility, and network effect. And out of that came a whole lot of companies and a whole lot of new change in healthcare.
So you and I first met at probably even 2009, not even 2010. Independa was founded April of 2009, and probably shortly thereafter, you and I had a conversation, and we didn't know each other, but you were in a position of great power and influence, and with people under you, budgets, global reach, global, megaphone. And I found it wonderful and also symptomatic of how you've been with everyone that I've known you since. You gave quality time, quality advice, and really a very caring, thoughtful approach. I remember sitting in your office and nothing else was there bothering us, and I know your schedule was incredibly busy always. So I never forgot that, and you stayed in touch, and you always were available with hopefully people not abusing that. But I saw so many companies and so many people really benefit from your position and you personally helping and whole ecosystem grow. So that's on a personal note. And then I think it was 2010, Don, at CES, or maybe it was 2011, where you invited Independa into the Qualcomm booth. And I don't know if you recall that, but that was a big deal for us. We were still a young company, and it gave us a huge amount of exposure. And we happened to have the first tablet for older adults. And it was the year that the tablets were being introduced, and we gray marketed some tablets from China. And our booth had so much activity just because of the tablet. People didn't care what we were doing. But the fact that it was a wireless tablet, and here's an example of an application. So it really helped launch the company. I'm forever grateful for you on that. Do you recall that at all? And I know you've done that plenty of times, but that was my first memory of the launch with you.
It's funny. I don't recall that exact specific event. I've been going to CES for probably close to 20 years. But I did things like that with a lot of companies, and as you know, I've met over the time with Qualcomm probably 2,000 companies that we worked with as we were building out an ecosystem of companies that were using and could use wireless technologies. So I'm glad that worked out well. We were always looking for good stories, and Independa in and of itself was a great story. And it was a great story that was using wireless. So at the end of the day, Qualcomm's a component manufacturer. It sells chips and licenses IP to make wireless devices and cell phones, and most of the wireless industry has Qualcomm technology one way or another involved in it. But we ended up having to you don't sell chips on chips, you sell chips on the stories of what they can do. And Independa was a great opportunity to do that.
Well, I appreciate, obviously, you seeing that and supporting us. And then what happened was, because of the crowds, you said, hey, you should come to Barcelona with us at the mobile conference. And I'm like, Don, we just launched this company. There's no way we should be in Barcelona. You said, don't worry about that. Just come on out and, you get exposure. And so it was really a 1-2 step into the market, even though we weren't going into Europe or worldwide at the time, but you gave us huge exposure and you were very kind to have us also tag along in Barcelona.
It was like my great privilege to help put companies with great ideas on the world stage at, frankly, two of the largest conferences in the world.
Yeah, no, I remember. So what I remember, Don, of you doing, and correct me if I'm wrong, I was always impressed wherever I went to conferences and many that I didn't go to globally initially. You were a keynote and you were speaking. Of course, you spoke not just eloquently, but you had a lot of great information and you pushed the boundaries of what was possible in every one of these. And I just personally saw a whole industry being built really around your efforts and on your shoulders. Did you feel that was happening? Was that a concerted effort, or it was just part of the job and it just happened on the side? It seemed like it was very planned and really pretty amazing to watch.
Well, I'm not sure it was as planned as it might have appeared. When I first got to Qualcomm, I was a healthcare services guy that landed in a silicon company and was a fish out of water for probably 6 months. And then I finally figured out that, Qualcomm was willing to sell silicon to anybody. The question was whether the healthcare industry would buy it. And so I had to create the demand side of the equation. And that meant I had to do things that pulled the healthcare industry into the ecosystem that Qualcomm has to ask questions about how to use the technology to improve their business models. And so the whole effort was really designed around getting healthcare to become a buyer of technology that would add mobility and connectivity and network effect to their solutions. All three concepts were fairly foreign in healthcare back in when I first got started in 2002. So and we told that story through the success stories of companies that we worked with, and through the aspirations and goals of young companies that maybe weren't yet classified as successful, but were launching very cool ideas around connectivity. And so by telling the story over and over and over again of many companies and telling the successes that they were having helping patients and helping save money and helping improve clinical outcomes, we could effectively cause more and more silicon to be sold into healthcare. And today we've got many success stories. For example, companies like ResMed, which are in the CPAP business, have over 45 million connected medical devices using cell phone chips. So that's just one example. Philips is another big heavy user, and there are many other examples. But it's that didn't exist when I first got started, and nor was anybody asking when I first got started.
Yeah, so that was very clear, and kudos to you because you really, I don't think it's an exaggeration. It's my personal view, but I also think it's accurate that you literally built this industry from what I could tell. And I wasn't seeing anyone else talk about the same things or present the same things and pushing the same concepts. And what was always refreshing for me was it was really about the solution and about this disruptive nature of what digital health can do and be and connectivity can bring to people. It wasn't about sort of the broken sick care system of here's a CPT code, here's an FDA code, and here's how you go sell into a hospital or a clinic. Those were being done by the individual companies, but what, like you said, the story and raising the tide for everyone was what I witnessed on the sidelines every time you got up and you spoke. And it really is second nature to everyone now. For instance, I remember the Withing scale being launched at CES, and actually they won the best product. That was, I think, the same year we were there together. And it was really an endorsement of your strategy of, wireless and, user-friendly, consumer-centric, and so forth. And onward everybody went.
Well, I had a great platform, and I had a great partner. Paul Jacobs was the CEO of Qualcomm. He's the one that recruited me in, and at one point in time in 2005, I got Paul together with Ted Torfey, who's the chief scientific officer of J&J. Frankly, just as two interested PhDs that would have a great conversation together, not because they really shared much in common. We had a great breakfast meeting, and it was at that meeting that I said, guys, I want to invite a couple of hundred CEOs in the healthcare industry to San Diego to talk for a day about how wireless technologies will change their business models. And but I need to do it over your two signatures. The CEO of Qualcomm and the Chief Scientific Officer of J&J, those are recognizable names and brands. They both said immediately yes, and I sent out, without an agenda, we sent out 200 invitations to come to San Diego and spend a day talking about this topic. And 135 showed up, one of which was the CEO of ResMed, Peter Farrell at the time, and founder and chairman. But along with many, many others. And Paul Jacobs attended that for the whole day, as did Ted. And we had a phenomenal first meeting. I thought I was holding one meeting, but at the end of the day, Paul Jacobs said, "Welcome back. We'll see you all next year." And I realized I had accidentally started a bit of a movement with that effort, and that launched into something called the Wireless Life Sciences Alliance, which became a global trade group in and around these very concepts. And in the small world category, one of the prototypes being shown at that first meeting by a company called Biancamed out of Ireland, which used RF to reflect off of people's bodies to acquire vital signs. Very, very revolutionary. Essentially contactless vital sign acquisition, was later acquired by ResMed as a result of that introduction in that meeting. So arguably, I like to think I started the M&A activity in the digital health space as well.
There's not much of an argument. I remember I was going to bring up the Wireless Life Sciences Association. I didn't know that was the genesis of it, but that was another example of essentially an industry trade group that you created and supported and funded, and it took its own life and form and growth and created its own opportunities. Fast forward, and we'll come back to some stuff in the middle, but fast forward to Impact. So you did a similar thing again. I don't know how the genesis of that came, but a couple of years ago, an independent actually participated in the first year. You founded this virtual first group. So tell us about that. That's really the next step of everything that I've seen you do the past decade.
Well, let me bridge that by saying by 2016, wireless and healthcare was pretty common. And the Wireless Life Science had grown and was quite a large group. And along came HIMSS, and we merged it with the HIMSS group, which is obviously the largest health IT organization in the world. And essentially, from Qualcomm's perspective, the job was done. The healthcare industry now knew what to do with wireless in general. There still was lots of learnings to do and lots of testing to do. And then about 4 years ago, I was about to give a talk in front of a couple thousand physicians. And I was thinking while I was in the green room, what was my opening line going to be for my talk? And my talk was about solutions in healthcare and what solutions look like in healthcare, not through the eyes of the physician, not through the eyes of a payer, but through the eyes of a consumer. And so I got out, and as I was walking on stage, the light went off, and I opened my talk by saying, except for the surgeons in the room, the rest of you are just selling opinions, and there's no consumer looking for an opinion. So I successfully pissed off 2,000 doctors. During the rest of the talk about it, where I explained what a solution looks like and what a patient thinks a solution looks like versus an opinion, I think I won over about half the audience. And that led me to begin to think about what is now called the virtual first healthcare industry, which is really, the way I describe it, an industry of healthcare providers that are designing their services and their offerings, their solution, around the concept of let's take everything we can to the patient in the same way Amazon does until we can't. So in other words, let's do the diagnosis, let's do the diagnostics, let's do the medical imaging if possible, let's take them the drugs they need. Let's do the doctor visits all virtually or delivered to their home or wherever they find convenient. And then minimize their interactions with healthcare bricks and mortar as much as you possibly can. And there are now hundreds of companies that are following this model. Some of the very first ones had very, very simple models. Probably some of the best known ones were HIMSS and HERS, who changed the ED marketplace and the birth control marketplace from one that was complex, where you made an appointment with the doctor's office, waited weeks to go, had to go wait in the waiting room, wait to see the doctor in the exam room, talk to the doctor for a few minutes, walk out with a prescription, now go visit the pharmacy. And they turned that all into a quick 5-minute phone call with the HIMSS and HERS folks, talk to a physician, and the prescription arrived the next day. So that was the beginning of a trend. Now we're into very much complex care, complex psychiatric care, complex GI care, emergency care, addiction care, rheumatoid arthritis, and the list goes on and on. Really, as many, one of the most interesting companies I'm working right now is in congestive heart failure, and it's really a specialty congestive heart failure practice. So really, many of the professions in medicine can be delivered. The vast majority of their service can be delivered virtually in conjunction with home delivered services. And then the bricks and mortar can be taken out. When that happens, a lot of cost gets taken out. And a lot of efficiency gets added in, and a lot of convenience gets added in. And frankly, it creates a lot of access for patients who might otherwise have to travel a long way for care.
And as you know, that really starts overlapping with the independent message of consumerization of healthcare into the home, and you get access to doctors and telemedicine overall, but dentists and therapy, but also access to education and exercise, all on this comfortable big screen. And really the evolution of healthcare going into the home and the evolution of what independent has always been about, which is a person-centric approach to keeping you where you are, longer, safer, and more comfortably, for us is now one and the same. It used to be about older adults and senior living and home care, but it's really about independence and health coming to you, like you said, rural examples, or people who can't drive anymore, or if there's a snowstorm, or just convenience and cost, and everything's coming to the home, whether it's continuation of care or whether it's hospital readmission penalties, et cetera. So in my time with the Impact Group, I was really impressed and learned a lot around the complexity of what you've started to solve. It sounds both easy and obvious, but the heavy lifting is being done by these companies to come up with the right agreements so that insurance companies pay and doctors get delivered, and clinical trials get to be exposed and leveraged and all that in the home in a way that always were using some different model, which was more expensive and more cumbersome. So kudos to you on another extension of this evolution of the digitization and the simplification of healthcare for the consumer and taking a lot of costs out.
Having done a large global trade organization once, I didn't want to run the second one, so I was lucky to find Jen Goldsmith, who runs the Digital Medicine Society, who quickly volunteered when I explained her the concept to her to take it on. And they've done DREEM, which is their short initials, have done a great job running Impact. The concept of virtual first healthcare delivery goes very nicely with the efforts of the Digital Medicine Society. So it's been a great road to go down, and they've been at it now for about 2.5 years. We've got companies participating ranging from Walmart and CVS to lots of startups to even some very large employers, et cetera, that all see the advantage of improving access, improving timeliness to care. I mean, some of these companies are able to get patients into specialists in the matter of 48 to 72 hours, where the norm in their community might be 3 to 6 months, and get them started on care. So, frankly, the traditional bricks and mortar healthcare, as we've all experienced it, has done themselves no favors from creating a customer-friendly, consumer-centric experience. They may be delivering great medicine, but they're not delivering a great customer experience. And so, frankly, where the traditional medicine is really exposed has been in reinventing the customer experience. It's a bunch of reinventing logistics. It's not about reinventing medicine and the art of medicine. It's really about reinventing the business of medicine into something that's much more consumer-centric in its design and much more fulfilling from creating an entire solution. So instead of going to the doctor and thinking, I've got to go make that appointment, I got to go wait in the waiting room, I got to drive there. I mean, the whole thing takes hours to do, and then all I do is get a list of things to go do and organize, like go to the pharmacy, go to the durable medical equipment store, et cetera, et cetera. What if those were all organized for you? And that's really the change. And when that starts happening, the consumers vote with their feet, as well as their checkbook. And I think that's what we're seeing happening in the virtual first care space, is the consumers are saying, this is a lot better. We see virtual first healthcare providers that have net promoter scores that are up in the 90s, which is unheard of for healthcare, completely unheard of.
Well, on behalf of a whole industry and country, and probably going to be global, if not already, thank you for starting that. I think it's time for Independent to maybe get back into the fray there. It was we were there in the beginning, and I think we skipped a year or two on the COVID side, maybe a year. But it sounds like it's a great platform to bring our ecosystem to bear for others. So you are the founder, and obviously, I don't know what your title is, CEO, president, owner of the Cardiff Ocean Group. So you get involved on top of all the good work that we've been talking about with individual companies. So if anybody wants to get in touch with you, I don't know if you have bandwidth at all, but that's also something that you do on the side and bring your expertise to bear. How does that work? How should somebody get in touch with you?
So I wear multiple hats. In 2014, Paul Jacobs, the CEO of Qualcomm, announced he was going to step down as CEO. I timed my leaving Qualcomm frankly, to the day that he stepped down. And I did that for a lot of reasons. One, I'd been working there for 11 and a half years. Two, the healthcare industry was now adopting the technologies, and I like new things. And I had been toying with the idea of doing a lot more board work. And so I started Cardiff Ocean Group in 2014, almost 9 years ago, to take on board seats and advisory work with companies, predominantly VC and PE-backed companies. However, I do a lot of advisory work with Fortune 500 companies, a lot of big pharma companies, and one of my favorite companies happens to be a large apparel company that happens to make smart apparel. So I built quite a nice portfolio of companies that I work with, and that's what I do full time. One of those entities that I got involved with helping found but didn't join it full time was Takeda Digital Ventures, which is the digital venture investment arm of Takeda, the giant pharmaceutical company. And so there I'm an operating partner, which means I don't have a full-time role, but I'm deeply involved with the investments and sourcing companies and helping companies grow there. And that investment fund only invests in virtual first care delivery, so it's directly related to that interest, and as well as technology platforms that enable virtual first care. And then as you know, when you first met me, I was working with Eric Topol at Scripps Research, and I had, through Qualcomm, had worked with him. We established and funded the first clinical trials program in digital health together. We brought West Health to the marketplace and raised 130 million there and got it launched and going. And we combined his research institute, which at that time when he started it was purely genomics, and turned it into a genomics and digital health combination, which has really become one of the leaders in the world. And very involved in the NIH program, All of Us, which is where he holds one of the largest grants in world history out of NIH. So very deeply involved there. When I left Qualcomm, he said, "How about you stay on and keep advising my team?" And so I'm Chief Digital Officer there. It's a very part-time role, but being Chief Digital Officer at Scripps Research through his Translational Care Institute. It's the Nature magazine calls it labeled it the #1 private research institute in the world. That's a great access point to the life science industry, obviously. And so I wear lots of hats, and what that means is I am aware of lots of activity by lots of people, by lots of companies. I've seen lots of things that work well. I've seen things that don't work so well. And so it's a lot of good experience, and I think that's why a lot of companies seek me out.
You started talking about your background in healthcare and ambulance and hospitals and physician services and so forth. What I found, more than interesting, was really valuable is you also understand the nuances of how things get paid, and not just the processes that need to be improved, but just the reality of who's paying for what and what the codes are and what's going to happen. And so an overlay of that into this reality check of progress and consumerization and everything else is always necessary, because a lot of times people confuse, optimizing necessarily something that makes sense from a just technology standpoint with something that's going to be successful. And those two may be two different things unless you figure out the pay system.
Getting paid in healthcare is one of the most complicated things. As the technology industry has moved into launching companies and new ideas in healthcare, they've had to confront this question of how do we get paid? And there's no one answer. There are direct-to-consumer models, there are B2B models, there are brand new models of value-based service contracts, bundled payments, capitation. There's working within the realm of the fee-for-service. there's no one answer. You kind of have to look at each situation independently and to come up with the best solution. But it's definitely a complicated landscape.
As we think about the future, what concerns you and what excites you?
What excites me is we're now at the point where we're seeing some activities I don't think most people would have anticipated in the last couple of decades. And just this morning, the FDA, as an example, the FDA approved Tide Pool's application for its Loop system, which is an artificial pancreas. This is the software necessary to take the data from continuous glucose monitors, interface it with software and an interface with the diabetic patient, and with pumps that control drugs into the body and completely automate the system. And what makes this so unusual is there are many very large companies in the pump and software business in healthcare. Some of the big names are Abbott and Medtronic and Tandem and Dexcom and many others. None of them took this on. What took this on was a crowdsourced effort of citizen scientists that developed the software necessary to make it happen, tested it on themselves. They didn't sell it, so they actually didn't have to get FDA approval because it wasn't up for sale. Over 5,000 patients actually tried the Loop software while they ultimately got it to the point where it was good enough to put it into a submission to the FDA, which was approved this morning.
That's fascinating.
That's a fascinating and exciting effort. And it also shows that it was done under a movement created by a friend of mine named Anna Collister called We're Not Waiting. And it was basically the citizens, the citizens of America, when it comes right down to it, and other parts of the world, coming together and telling the industry, the medical device industry and the services industry, we're not waiting for you. You're not on our time schedule. We're the patients. We're the ones living with this disease. You're not moving fast enough. You're not changing fast enough. You're not adopting fast enough. You're not delivering the solution we're looking for. So we'll go do it ourselves. And frankly, that's a lot of what I end up doing. Is I'm not against healthcare as it's currently delivered. I'm against healthcare bad customer experiences and not solving and bringing forth solutions the patients actually need. And so what we're beginning to see is this beginning of an effort where the consumers, the patients, are not waiting. They're making their movement. They're walking with their feet. I had one doctor at a large convention I was speaking at say, I don't really believe the whole world's going to change and everybody's going to get all their care virtually, etc. And I said, I agree with you. And of course, he was a little shocked because he was at the mic in front of 2,000 other doctors, and now the speaker's agreeing with him, and he thought he was going to take me on. And I said, no, I agree with you. And I answered, they only have to take your margin. At which point he had no retort and went and sat down. And that's the point. That's how new movements get started. They don't get started by taking 50, 60, 70% of the market away from you. They get started by taking the margin away from the existing health delivery system, and that's what's happening here.
Well, the classical innovator's dilemma, right? The disruption that comes from outside and just chips away at places you don't care about or think about and give a lot of credibility, and then suddenly you're displaced. So you're continuing to lead in all those areas. Before we go to what concerns you, along the lines of what you just talked about with the FDA approval, do you think that there's going to be sort of this conversion of biotelemetry and devices and AI and maybe other types of pumps and essentially like a bionic extension that's digital, that does things, and maybe it's very specific to a function or an organ, or maybe it's just to enhance things like an exoskeleton? Where do you see all that?
Well, it maybe is overstating to call it moving into self-help, but let's just use the self-help paradigm. None of us is an exaggeration, but 99% of us book our own airline tickets online. We don't call a travel agent. We don't drive down to the airport and talk to a ticket agent. So the airline industry moved its entire, we check our own bags in, we put the tags on, the process has been moved to a self-help kind of a movement. And that's what's beginning to happen in here. So as we can move things like diagnostics at home, Q Health in San Diego based company is a good example of your own home laboratory for medical tests. And then as we begin to see some technologies, we've had continuous glucose monitoring, which is essentially a lab test, but rather than being run once every 3 months or every 6 months, It's run continuously, and you're getting a new measurement every 3 minutes. So now we have the concept of trending in a very timely fashion as a way of giving us information necessary to actually manage, monitor, and interface with the disease and do the interventions, the clinical interventions that are necessary on a timely manner. So as more diagnostics move into the home or even move on body and become more continuous, where more data points can be gathered, we've all seen the Apple Watch continue to gain more and more health-like functions. Some of those functions are becoming to fall under FDA purview as those functions can begin to provide feedback and then eventually manage and control other therapeutic systems, whether they be drug-based or device-based. We're beginning to see this kind of concept of self-help, meaning I can manage it my own. I really don't need the healthcare system and the bricks and mortar system to do so, number one. And number two, the feedback loops aren't the every 3 months or every 6 month visit to the doctor. The feedback loops may be literally every second based on the technology that you have, either that you're wearing or is in your home or you have with you.
Well, already we're seeing the smart toilets and checking out your, excrements for disease and flu and whatnot. And I don't want to close with what concerns you, but it's good to see, hear about your thoughts about where the challenges are still.
What concerns me is most actually is the norm, the industry as it exists today, fighting change and not understanding why they're fighting change. I mean, the AMA and the American Hospital Association fought Medicare. They thought that was a bad idea, and they fought it. They fought electronic claim submission, the idea that you could electronically submit the claim and get paid quickly somehow was a change they couldn't imagine taking on. They preferred somehow, for some crazy reason, like the idea of licking stamps and sending bills by snail mail. Essentially change is hard for folks, and the practice of medicine and going through the amount of years you go through in order to become a doctor and stuff kind of ingrains a set of workflow processes that become hard to change. And then they get adopted by organizations like hospitals and they become hard to change. And then somebody comes along and says, I've got a better way to do this. I've got a more consumer-centric way. I got something that's friendlier. I got something that's cheaper. And it involves all brand new logistics and all brand new workflows. And now you have a question of, do I change what I was doing and move into this brand new world, or do I keep doing what I was doing? And that's frankly the biggest thing that happens. Most of the new companies I see that radically change workflows and radically change processes in healthcare actually hire de novo, meaning they hire a whole new team and launch a whole new service. They don't try to work with the existing healthcare providers directly because they're too hard to change. It's too expensive to get them to change and it takes too much effort. So they really start competing efforts. So really, I'm optimistic about the new competitors. But at the end of the day, we have to have more and more of the existing bricks and mortar competitors wake up and recognize that consumer-centric care delivery models actually make sense. And at some point they'll make their own decisions individually whether they join that movement or whether they stay in the old terms. And this is the same business cycle we see everywhere. You see new innovative companies, they start to scale. Eventually you get to the point where you're running a cash cow system. And I would say most of the bricks and mortar is running cash cows. And then eventually the models start dying off. And we're already seeing this happen. It wasn't that long ago, I would say less than a decade ago, that going to see a psychologist or seeing a psychiatrist meant booking an office appointment and getting on the couch, so to speak, the proverbial couch, in a bricks and mortar setting. 2/3 of all mental health consultations today are virtual. That's happened in the last decade. That concept is moving into other parts of healthcare with some degree of rapidity. And, I think, it'll be hard for a lot of folks to change. It'll be hard for a lot of folks to decide that they want to change and adapt the new model. But that's okay. That's, frankly, the way all businesses evolve over time as they move through that cycle and eventually, in some cases, actually die out. And I would say mental health, other than the most acute cases that may need confinement in a facility, what we've seen here is the mental health space is already effectively, the majority of it is already moved into a different alternative world.
Wow. And you've had your fingers and the cheerleader megaphone and the podium and all that to create all that. So on a personal note, thank you for all that you've done for me and for Independa in helping our success to date. And there's nothing more valuable than getting exposure and getting good feedback and getting opportunities from people who care in positions of power and also visibility. So thank you for that. And also thank you for the industries that you're creating and you continue to create. It helps, the whole country and the whole world, what you're doing. Anything else you want to add before I close? What a wonderful time I've had chatting with you.
Well, as you can tell, I love change and pushing things forward, and I've had a pretty amazing career building multiple multi-billion-dollar companies and multiple smaller companies, all bringing kinds of new innovation. But what I really like, and I appreciate what you were doing and you continue to do in the marketplace with Independa, is bringing things in that make life easier for the consumer, for your mom, for your family, for the extended family. And I think, frankly, our healthcare industry historically, because there's been a disconnect between the payer is not the individual. It's been a government, or it's been a health insurer or an employer, and the end consumer who's receiving the healthcare. Because that disconnect exists, we have not had a consumer-friendly operation. And I always ask the question: is this what I would want? Is this what I would want from my mom? And if the answer is no, which I would say applies most of the time when you apply it to a healthcare equation, I view that as a great opportunity to disrupt and create something better.
Well, thank you for all that you've done, that you do and will be doing. It makes a huge difference in all sorts of ways to the whole industry, new industries, and most importantly, to people's lives and pocketbooks. So thanks again, Don. It's a pleasure to be with you today and to know you all this time. And I'm going to look for your continued successes. Appreciate your time.
Thanks, Kian, and good luck to Independa.
Thanks for listening. We always would love to hear your thoughts and suggestions. You can leave them for us at podcasts@independa.com. That's plural, PODCASTS, @independa.com. And make sure you follow us on your favorite podcast platform. I'll be ruminating with more thought leaders on future podcasts and do hope to see you then. In the meantime, stay healthy and happy.